Tracy, we're back.
Hello.
We are back. Hi. We are back as we are just about every single Sunday night for Ovis Zap Chat on the ZapLife platform. And so if you are joining us for the first time, thank you so much. If you have joined us for a couple of Sundays now, we really thank you guys for coming back and joining our discussions on Sunday. My name is Elsa Ramon. I am joined by Tracy Grant. We are both co-founders of Ovis News and the Ovis community. And if you don't know what we are a community. We are a community started by multiple journalists from all kinds of platforms, newspaper, television, and we wanted to create a community where people could go to get news that was free of fake news and everything that falls under that category: misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, altered video, pictures, you name it. Everything that is plaguing social media. We wanted to be a place where people could go and make sure that they are guaranteed accurate information, free of all of that stuff. And we're doing it with technology, right, Tracy?
Yes, we are. I mean, as you know, these days it feels virtually impossible to find an unbiased outlet where you can just find out the news without, the spin, without the editorializing. And that's what we're trying to do here at Ovis. We're trying to bring you news and topics and interviews that basically, just targets the facts. And then you get to decide for yourself how to interpret it or how you feel about it.
And what we're doing, Tracy, is through our website, if you go to ovis.news, we are actively looking for journalists to become part of our community. And this is going to be a global community, by the way. So we're looking for people from all over the country to join us as a journalist. We are also looking for a community of fact checkers that are certified by Ovis, because there is a real science behind it. So we are also in the process of building our community of fact checkers as well. And then, of course, just regular community members who want to become part of the Ovis community to get their news and information and even have things fact checked by our growing group of fact checkers and journalists in the community, because we always invite people to do that as well. Because other news organizations traditionally and historically don't have real fact-checking units. And we are one of the only communities and news organizations that are going to be doing that. And we're going to be using blockchain technology and token curated registry to keep everybody honest, from the journalists to the fact-checkers to the people who come to the community just to get information.
And Elsa, I'm sure, through your long career in journalism and in TV news, just like me, you've probably met many people who said, oh, that's kind of cool, your job. Like, how do you get into that? Or I have ideas for stories. I never see these topics, addressed. This is the opportunity on Ovis, if there are things that you think somebody needs to do a story on this thing and I never see it when I turn on the TV, that's what we're here for. That's what, you can join and do your own story on that. And we're all working together. We're all working together to produce the type of news that basically doesn't exist anymore out there. We just we want the facts. That's it.
Yeah, and you brought up an excellent point, Tracy. Another distinguishing factor about the Ovis community is that we don't make decisions just solely based on what we feel people want to see.
Right.
That's one of the problems with corporate media, is that, you and I both worked for legacy networks. We've worked for corporate media, both for 20 plus years. And the decisions are coming from the top from people who think they know what everybody in the community wants to hear. The difference with Ovis is that people actually have a say about what they want covered. So if I came to the Ovis community and I wanted to see more information about a certain topic, I could easily approach any one of the reporters in our community and ask, hey, can you cover this topic? I don't see this being covered in my community or on my local news or in my local newspaper or radio station or whatever. And that's the luxury that the community members have. They can do that and request a journalist to cover something that they want to hear about and that they care about. And they can also solicit fact checkers to check something that maybe they found on social media just to verify that what they're reading is correct. So somebody can bring that information to the Ovis community, have our fact checkers go through it and give them a verdict after they've had time to fact check it. So it's community involved. It relies on the community to be able to have their input and their say in what gets covered and what they'd like to see get covered, because
Right.
we're about consensus as well.
And I mean, as we both know, it's been a huge news week in the last few days. Craziness.
It's been a huge news year.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. And the interesting thing about Ovis, I mean, with everything that went on in Washington D.C. this past week, there are other aspects to the story that I'm sure people are sitting at home saying, I'd like to know more about this part. What made the people want to go do this, or what did they do? Did they ever have contact with the politicians before that? Like, were there other avenues? Like, these are things that in the wide, the broad scheme of things, you might never hear these angles of the story. They might not be the flashiest ones that would be on the front page of the newspaper, but they're still really interesting and important subject matter, and that's the kind of thing that we're going to be doing. We're going to be, if you say to us, I want to know more about this part of it, like, I get the bigger picture, but there are parts of it that I still don't have the answers for, you can tell us and we'll find out. We'll do a story on it.
And that's what we're addressing tonight. You talked about the fact that there's been so much news. And so during our weekly discussions and our meetings amongst us with Ovis, something really struck me, and I brought it up, and everybody else had some concerns as well, and it had to do with the COVID-19 vaccine. And I saw multiple people on a social media platform criticizing a news organization that had put out a tweet that said, ER nurse gets COVID-19 vaccine and then ends up getting COVID-19. Well, a lot of people, to me, that headline is clickbait. To me, that screams fear. Click on the story, oh my God, somebody got a COVID-19 vaccine and they still got COVID. And I felt instantly that was incredibly unfair to do to the readers and people in general who are looking for relevant, accurate information, especially regarding the vaccine, because people are concerned, people are worried, people want to know that they're making the right decisions. And that example of that one news organization putting out that headline, in my opinion, was clickbait and very irresponsible, because if the person actually did read the story, they were able to find out that the COVID-19 vaccine is a two-part process, and that in that process, in between, it still is possible to contract the virus, from what I understand. So I felt that was very unfair to scare people in such a way, but I feel like, and I know you feel this way, Tracy, this is how a lot of news organizations are operating, and this is how not only people get scared, but people click on clickbait, and then they share this information without even reading it, because they think the whole story is in the headline.
Exactly.
And that's how misinformation and disinformation and fake news and everything just spreads like wildfire. I mean, that's all it takes. So we decided that tonight we were going to have our chief fact checker check on something in particular that a community member actually brought to our attention. Somebody who is part of the Ovis community was sent a video that was supposedly a nurse talking about the vaccine and saying some things that to me were wildly scary and untrue. So we had Kara Minal. If you've been with us before, you know Kara is our chief fact checker for Ovis, for the Ovis community. So, hi
hello.
Karen, welcome. Happy Sunday night.
Good to see you, Karen, joining us from the Big T tonight, right?
Exactly,
Yes.
Texas.
Yes, at H-Town, I should say, Houston, for those of you who know the lingo in Texas. But anyway, you know, so we had this video sent to us by an Ovis community member, and of course we sent it to Karam this week so that he could have time to look at this person's claims about the COVID-19 vaccine and tell us what is factual and what isn't, and why this could have been so potentially damaging and probably did cause some damage as it was circulated on social media platforms.
Yeah, well, it's a video actually posted by Tamika Morrow, who is a nurse practitioner in Michigan, I believe. And the video was on Facebook. I think it was a live stream as well. I'm not very sure. It reached about 350,000 people on Facebook, which isn't a very high number, but you know, if a lot of those people actually believed in what she was saying, that might be, you know, that
And
might
she's
cause a
also
lot of harm
just-
to them.
And she's also just one person. As we know, there's a lot of misinformation
Right,
about
of
the
course.
vaccine floating around. So one person can have an impression of 350,000 people. Imagine all that other
All the other
misinformation about
stuff.
it. Sure. So,
Of course, and it's
absolutely.
she's just one
Anyway,
person.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Karen, to interrupt, but I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, totally fine. Of course, she's just one person in, you know, this huge chain of misinformation that we have around the COVID-19 vaccine. And she kind of mainly talks about how she discourages people from taking the vaccine. She talks about the vaccine she talks about the vaccine, and she thinks that it will cause an autoimmune disease. She thinks that you know, vitamin D and a supplemental medicine could cure the COVID-19 vaccine and could stop it dead in its tracks. And you know, she gives a lot of positive vibes to people, and she thinks that, you know, the vaccine isn't really necessary, and that's a scary thing to be posting on a platform this large and with a crowd this large. And her being a nurse practitioner, she has that credential where people tend to trust her and, you know, tend to put their health in her hands, and I think that's a very critical place to be in, and you know, she, I don't think, has done such a good job. But yeah, we're coming out with a fact check this week, probably tonight or Monday, and that will be about a number of the misinformation that she talked about in her video. So yeah, you can find that on obis.news. Is that music coming from me? Or?
Yeah, I
Are you
have
guys hearing the
no
music?
idea. It's Rod Stewart. I do recognize that.
As much as I love this song,
Yeah.
it may not be the right time to hear it, but maybe
No.
after the show we can have a few drinks and listen to this
Oh yeah,
song.
a little. I should add this to my karaoke repertoire. Actually, I have to remember to write that one down.
Karam, you're just so cool that, you know, you make the coolest songs from Rod Stewart just randomly
Yeah,
start
exactly.
playing
Yeah, I
during our during our discussions.
Well, you know what's interesting about what you brought up, Karam? I mean, you know, obviously we all know that there are communities of anti-vaxxers out there. So,
Right.
I mean, we all knew at some point we'd start hearing from them about this brand new vaccine. So, so that part's not surprising. And now is when all of this material is going to start coming out that, you know, people will have to decipher, okay, this person is saying, no, don't take it. You know, this person is saying, yes, take it. So, I mean, obviously, we can predict that in the next coming months, there'll be a lot of debate, and people will really need to figure out if these voices that they're hearing and these people who are popping up online with their opinions, whether they really have the credentials to give their opinions. And I mean, with this woman, that's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, some people probably read it and went, oh, she said this.
Yeah, definitely. Some people definitely did that. I mean, I looked at her comments, and they all were praising her, thanking her for telling these, amazing information that she has given. So, the comments were really enthusiastic about not taking the vaccine, which is, it's scary. And what we have done this year is we have made everything political. So now mask wearing is political, of the vaccine is political. So I think we have to kind of stay clear of these political conversations about vaccine and try to focus on, what the truth is, what the data is saying, what the scientists are saying, instead of making this all a political game. I mean, this video wasn't that political, but, the politics play into this, have been playing into this whole year. And that is very scary when it comes to the health of millions of people.
Right. And it's interesting in terms of anti-vaxxers. I mean, it's a situation that social media has been trying to figure out how to deal with for a really long time. I mean, there's different forums where anti-vaxxers, can say whatever they want, and people can join in, and there's a whole chorus of people saying, don't get the measles shot, don't get this and that. But then there are other outlets, like, for instance, Pinterest was one of the first to take a stand and say, you know what? We will not have this information on our site anymore. Anyone posting this anti-vaccine material, we're just going to delete it. And a lot of people criticized that when that happened. But right now, it's probably one of the only respites online where you won't see it, or at least you won't see it for long, because when they see it, they take it down. But I mean, this is something on Facebook and on Twitter and everything that we are already seeing so much of. And as more and more people have the opportunity to get the shot, we will see more stories like the one you're telling us about with this nurse practitioner, and it's all about sort of deciphering, well, what's true and what's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most important thing is to understand what our verified and what our trusted sources are. So, we have to understand what a trusted source is, how we can find one, and how to look at that trusted source when we need to. Because not every source of information is trusted at this point. And we just have to understand that there are people out there who aren't telling us the truth, who are giving misinformation, because they don't know, or because of some other reasons that they have. But we have to understand that we have to look for verified and trustworthy sources when we see any information online at this point, especially if it's on social media, and if it's someone talking to a camera, we have to find another source for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something when, our fact checkers on ovis.news, they'll be turning to Karen to help them out in, as we travel down this road. I mean, this is subject matter that's going to be around for a really long time.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
All right, Karam, we are we're getting blessed with some music tonight.
I know.
And, I think
you're not hearing it. I'm totally hearing it, and trying not to sing along with it, because this used to be.
Yeah, because I love me some Shabba Ranks, and that's what's going on right now. First it was Rod Stewart, and now it's Shabba Ranks. At least I think, if my memory serves me well. But Karam, so what do you suggest to people when they come across something making claims, especially from people who claim to be medical professionals, or who really are medical professionals, casting this kind of doubt? What do you recommend people do with that information?
I think the first thing I recommend is not to reshare it or not to retweet it. Just take a second, take a deep breath, and see what they're saying. Secondly, I think we should do some research online. I mean, all of us should be more media literate. We should learn to do our own online researches. We should trust some fact checking and look at their sources that they post, because those sources can lead you to an article or a medical scientific journal that talks about what the medical professional is talking about, and you can for yourself actually see what the article says and make your own decisions. I think that's the most important part, making your own decisions instead of trusting someone that you don't really know and you've seen online a couple of times. Make your own decisions. Try to take a deep breath. Don't reshare anything that you don't know where the sources are coming from. So yeah, I think that's what I would.
Especially when it comes to, let's be honest, life or death information. I mean, COVID is no joke, and we're all trying to figure out ways to stay healthy. And in a situation like this, where we're all, desperate to understand what the next step is, maybe check it out before you post it. I mean, it's one thing to post like I did earlier, that there's going to be a new Sex and the City movie, which is really exciting. I didn't have to go check that because if it turned out to be wrong, then that's not a big deal. But if I'm posting information about a COVID vaccine and about pockets around the country where more and more people are getting sick, then maybe take a beat and just check it out. Google a little and see what you come up with before you become part of a chorus of people delivering misinformation.
Absolutely, yeah. Take a deep breath, calm down, and check the sources.
All right, Karam, thank you so much. As always, we love starting off the show with Karam and something to be fact-checked, because chances are some people who are watching us may have seen that particular piece of information floating around on social media. So Karam checked the facts of that video. He dispelled some of the myths that were perpetuated there on that video. Okay, so I'm very excited about hearing from our next guest, Dr. Sandeep Kandhar. He is a thoracic surgeon, and I'm particularly excited to hear from him because I really want to know what it's like for doctors who are in the hospital setting every single day, like you are, Dr. Kandhar, of what it's like for you when you encounter patients and people coming into the hospital who may have absorbed a lot of misinformation and are now fearful or doubtful. What's that like for you, and how does it play into how you do your job and how you help people get better?
Also, Tracy, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a privilege to be here. Misinformation is something that plagues our practices every day. It's not uncommon for patients to come into the office and feel like they are experts because they've Googled everything about their disease process. And we're happy to have patients that have a tremendous amount of information, and we encourage our patients to have information about their disease processes. We just want to make sure that information is the right information. And so when patients come to us with claims of quote-unquote facts that are really just unfounded and not at all verifiable by the scientific community, it's a huge burden for the health system. It's a huge burden for us from a time perspective, and it takes away from the care and management of patients that really desperately need care and services in the hospital. So
we're specifically talking tonight about recent challenges for surgeons like you, doctors, people on the front lines and adjacent to the front lines. I mean, you're in the hospital every single day, so you're there. You see it all the time with your own patients. But we're talking about the COVID-19 vaccine and a lot of the misinformation that is floating around social media and just coronavirus in general. What's it like when you encounter patients who are fearful because of a lot of the misinformation they read?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for us as healthcare practitioners. It's we are in the hospital every day. We see the sickest of the sick in the hospital. I'm very much on and behind the front lines. As a thoracic surgeon, the predominance of what I take care of is lung cancer. So I am not one of the frontline workers looking after patients with COVID-19 every day, but my colleagues are. And every bed that's taken up by a patient with COVID-19 is a bed and resources that can't be given to patients that have other disease processes. And we're not separating out which disease process is most important, but COVID-19 is new to us. It's an infection, and this vaccine, like other vaccines, holds the hope and promise of really diminishing the effect of this disease process. We have not seen this type of success with treatment with disease processes like cancer, heart disease, and other illnesses that we treat. This vaccine has proven to be very effective, and myself and my colleagues in the hospital are running to the fronts of the lines to get these vaccines. I myself have been vaccinated. I just had my second shot day before yesterday. And I encourage all of my patients to get vaccinated. I understand some of the resistance and reluctance about this vaccine. It is new. It has been quickly approved. We recognize that it is a novel type of vaccine. And so there is uncertainty and there are risks like there are with any treatment. But what I think we need to recognize is that the risks that coronavirus poses to the health of the entire community is far, far, far greater. Mm-hmm. And if we're to be able to take care of the patients that we need to take care of, that have illnesses that we don't have effective therapies for, as effective therapies as we have for what it seems to be coronavirus, then it really hinders the healthcare system from being able to do its job.
Mm-hmm. Now, can we possibly debunk some of the things that you have heard? I mean, when you're dealing with patients or talking to your fellow doctors, like, what are some of the things that they keep hearing from patients and they have to keep saying, look, I understand what you're asking, but that's not the case. That's not true. The things that you're asking about are things that a lot of people have questions about, but it's misinformation.
Sure.
You need to, in a way, you kind of have to, obviously have to trust your doctor when he or she says, we need to take this step in order to protect you, but a lot of people will come back and say, but I heard that blah, 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 blah. So can we debunk some of those things?
Sure. So I think there's a variety of things there, right? So number one, I think you need to consider your source, right? So there are a multitude of healthcare professionals that are out there that have opinions and come from a position of knowledge, resource, backing, support, education. And I think it's very important that anybody who's looking at any piece of information consider the source. For me, for example, I'm a thoracic surgeon. I treat lung cancer for a living. The lungs are the space of my medical expertise, but that doesn't mean that I have the expertise of, say, somebody like Dr. Fauci, who is a career virologist, a career expert in immunology and at the forefront of that field. But we can agree on the basic general scientific principles, and there's absolutely nothing that Dr. Fauci has said that I would disagree with. And if I did, I would have to mount a great deal of evidence to debunk that. So in my view, somebody like Anthony Fauci comes at the highest level of expertise for something like a virus. Right? So when you look at other disease processes, it's always important to consider the source. Are they a scientist that does research in that field? Are they a medical physician that treats patients of that field? Are they a nurse or a nurse practitioner that treats them at a different level? Are they in the lab as a technician? Are they somebody on the street or a neighbor who has heard about something from a family member? And I think you can see that there are orders of magnitude differences in the level of expertise that comes your way. Unfortunately, what happens in the community is that sometimes the people that are most available to media resources or are most eloquent about speaking about something may not be the most knowledgeable. And
Right.
I think this is very important. So that would be number one. Number two, you mentioned some of the myths that we might be able to debunk. So one of the things that I hear a lot are, oh my goodness, I'm injecting a piece of the virus into me. This is going to give me COVID-19. False. You're injecting, these are mRNA viruses. So you're injecting the blueprint for a very small piece of the virus. You're injecting the blueprint to manufacture the spike protein, which is on the surface lining of the virus. We have no evidence, and there's been no evidence to demonstrate that injecting spike protein will actually induce the virus. So why does this come about? This comes about because when people get the vaccine, as I did, people can feel very ill. We call them side effects. They may simply be responses to the vaccine to assure yourself that the vaccine is actually working. I had tremendous fatigue. I had a lot of arm soreness. I had chills and I had fevers. But all of this dissipated within a day or two. The first time I had it, it dissipated in 3 days. The second time I had it, it dissipated earlier today. So people mistake these symptoms for, oh my goodness, I've now got COVID-19. And then they get on the general media or the social, they get on social media platforms and they start talking about this. And I think that that's inappropriate and that's clear misinformation. So this vaccine cannot induce the disease process of COVID-19. Number two, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Kandhar. I know before this slips my mind, you said consider the source for people when they're seeing information on social media about COVID-19 and vaccines. Earlier in the show, we had somebody from the Ovis community present a video that she saw of a nurse practitioner who had posted a video, and we had Kara Minal, our chief fact checker, check a lot of the claims that she was making in this video. Essentially, she was encouraging people to not get the vaccine and listing a bunch of reasons why they shouldn't, and almost all of it was misinformation. So when people present as medical professionals like this person, I can't imagine that makes your job any easier when people are insisting what they're hearing is coming from a nurse or a nurse practitioner or somebody who claims to be a doctor.
So I think, unfortunately, she's done a disservice to the nurse practitioner community. Nurse practitioners are an integral part of the medical community. Without them, we would not be able to take care of the volumes of patients that are necessary to take care of, simply because there are physician and surgeon shortages within the United States, as well as especially in underserved areas all throughout the country, and nurse practitioners fulfill a very crucial role in those environments. But I would want to know, what kind of nurse practitioner is she? What sorts of disease processes does she treat? Is she in practice on her own, or does she have supervising physicians? There are nurse practitioners that practice under their own license, but it would be important to know exactly what it is she treats. And then once you understand that, why is it that she's saying the things she's saying, and is what she's saying coming from a position of scientific rigor, or is it just based on anecdote? And I think many people put things out into social media based on anecdote, and they don't. This isn't the way that science should be propagated. And we recognize that there are differences in the way health professionals will communicate things. So I don't mean to say that there's any. I think the hierarchy of knowledge doesn't come with degrees. I think it comes with familiarity and scientific rigor.
Right. And as I was mentioning earlier, I mean, obviously, there are ferocious anti-vaxxer communities out there, and this is an additional thing for them to debate online. And I mean, for my whole life, I have had people say to me, "Oh, you got the flu shot. That will give you the flu," and that has been going on for God knows how long. So now we have this brand new vaccine for potentially deadly disease, and basically, it's the same thing. And you have communities out there who are already, against vaccines, and now, the medical community is introducing this new one. And as you said, it's new. So there are things about it that, unlike the flu shot, there are things about it that we still might not have all the answers to. But so far, what we know is that despite, the different companies that are offering it, we seem to be getting results, yes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it's a nice comparison to compare this vaccine to the flu shot. As a matter of fact, the early reports suggested that the FDA was slated to approve a COVID-19 vaccine if it reached a target efficacy of 50%, which is roughly the target efficacy that the flu shot reaches, that it's about 50% efficacious. Both vaccines that are out now and available, the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, reached roughly 95% efficacy. So if you look at the data that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine for the Pfizer vaccine, for example, 43 plus thousand people were participated in that study, and in the vaccinated group, roughly I think 8 or 9 patients got coronavirus in the vaccinated group, and in the placebo group, it was roughly of 169 patients got coronavirus. So you're looking at an efficacy rate of 95%. So if you look at the two groups of people, roughly 20,000 in each group, and you have about 10 that got coronavirus in the vaccine group and 170 that got coronavirus in the placebo group, well, which group do you want to be in? We get it's not perfect. We get that medicine is going to have side effects, there's going to be adverse events, but we are looking at a huge societal problem. And so what I would say to those anti-vaxxers is, you live in a community. We do not live in isolation. We live as part of a community. And having a vaccine like this and getting vaccinated really only works if the vast majority of people take the vaccine. If you have 30 or 40 or 50% of people that take the vaccine, we're not going to get anywhere. You need more than 70% of people to take the vaccine for this to be a societal good. And we have good historical evidence. I look at smallpox. It's essentially been eradicated across the globe. And that was because of a vaccine. Look at polio. Look at measles. The precedence for vaccinations is huge. And I appreciate the fact that this is a new type of vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, but this wasn't discovered last year. The mRNA vaccines have been talked about for 30 years. And the research and the science that goes into them is rigorous. I don't sit on the bench, but I certainly have a great respect for those people that sit behind those labs and doing that work for the past several decades to bring us advances like this. And as somebody who works in a hospital that takes care of patients on the front line, I can tell you it is not fun having to delay cases, having to think about canceling cases to take care of people that have cancer, because our hospital is so full with patients that have been overrun by coronavirus.
Dr. Kandhar, if you could just talk to us a little bit about the way that COVID has affected the communities of color, particularly African Americans, and how that could also impact the way people decide or decide not to get vaccinated.
Yeah, it's a super important question, especially with everything that we've seen in the past year with the Black Lives Matter movement and race and gender and the inequalities that our country continues to grapple with, and now it's permeating into our health system. It's unclear to me the exact differential effects of the coronavirus in various races. I can tell you that we have seen a preponderance of more advanced disease in the Black and Hispanic communities in my own hospital system, um, but it is it seems to be affecting all races, male and female. It does seem to affect old more than young. The the vaccine trials that were conducted were all conducted trying to simulate the American population as a whole. So of course, the minority populations were a minority in the vaccine trials as well. Subgroup analyses do not seem to pick up much in any difference in terms of how efficacious the vaccine would be in a minority population versus a Caucasian population. So I think much is left to be determined in that setting. But the data that we have to date would not dissuade me from recommending the vaccine to anybody out there. And currently, the vaccine is recommended and available for that high risk population, specifically healthcare workers and patients over the age of 75. I think these are the highest risk populations, and I think that despite some of the differences that may exist that we may elucidate down the road, I think the magnitude of that difference will not in any way overshadow the importance of the vaccine and its effectiveness in the battle against coronavirus.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's fair to say that in some parts of the country, I mean, COVID is ravaging the Black community, and yet you've probably seen that there is still reticence from many of those people to get the vaccine, and this is not, as we know, it's not just paranoia. I mean, in history we have seen examples that it makes you understand why some communities of color would say, "Hey, I don't want to be the guinea pig for this." I mean, specifically, let's talk about the Tuskegee syphilis study. I mean, it's heartbreaking the way that was conducted and the people who suffered for that, and that is fresh in a lot of people's minds.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, and I certainly understand. Um, I understand its relevance, and I certainly empathize with it. And this is very familiar to all of us in the healthcare space that do any type of research, because the Tuskegee events and events in our prison system and events in other underserved populations throughout our American history, which none of us can really be proud of, are are a constant reminder of why we must be rigorous in the way that we do things, and why this is a constant part of our curriculum on a year over year basis, to be reminded of these things, to review these things, to take ethics courses in these things, to understand that this is not how we do things anymore. And science has evolved. We as a people have evolved, and I certainly understand the distrust. I certainly can sympathize with those people that feel that way because of our history, and our history cannot be ignored. But we have to believe and we have to trust that we have evolved, we have gotten better. Um, the studies that have been done scientifically with an extraordinary amount of rigor. And although the FDA approvals came fast, that doesn't really mean that shortcuts were taken. It's just that they were specifically prioritized. Most of us that do any form of research and try to get things through FDA approval know that this long and very bureaucratic time that often is required can be detrimental to patients, and it's very frustrating to us. But there are a lot of agendas, and there are a lot of other projects that are of equal importance. In this particular case, the FDA unified themselves and put themselves to a task because of how important this was to the American community, in our case, with our FDA. And with that concerted effort, we're able to garner an approval very rapidly. I'm Asian myself. Like I said before, I've taken vaccine number two. I've gotten my booster, and I've had my relevant adverse events. I've been lucky; I haven't had any serious adverse events. But I would not hesitate in recommending this vaccine to anybody of any race and any color. I will take this opportunity to underscore the importance of social distancing and mask wearing. These are clear, beneficial attributes that are necessary in a community. And one can argue about how effective one type of mask is to another, but it should not be a political statement to wear or not wear a mask. It should be a statement of solidarity, it should be a statement of community, and it should be a statement of healthcare awareness.
And just so people know, I mean, I brought up the Tuskegee syphilis study earlier, but just in case people don't necessarily have the background to understand how, what that has to do with the mindset of anyone in the Black community right now. I mean, is there a way you can kind of connect the dots there for us?
Sure. I mean, intentionally attributing a study or intentionally attributing a very morbid, a very life changing, and even potentially lethal infection into a community without their consent, and then observing them over years and years of time, um, predicated on the notion that they were just inferior beings and subject to our experimentation, was wrong. And that ethical reality is reinstated on literally a yearly basis for anybody that does any type of medical research. And we are not only required, but it will consistently reaffirm that those things happened in an effort to continue to understand the ethical and moral effect of all the work that we do. And it can oftentimes, I think people get caught up in research and get caught up in, we're here for the greater good, and if we sacrifice one group of people, we'll be able to help a larger group of people. And the greater good argument uh, can come up a lot, but it's doing things the right way and for the right reasons is what we're about in the scientific community here in the U.S. And everything that's been done um, in pursuit of the vaccine, in the battle against coronavirus. When we see these things on the front lines, when we first started getting patients in the hospitals, we didn't know how to treat these patients. We initially believed that putting everybody on a ventilator as quickly as possible was the absolute best thing to do. We very quickly learned that that wasn't necessarily absolutely the best thing to do. That trying to keep people off the ventilator was oftentimes much more relevant. We learned about various drugs that were available. We learned about different vitamins, and all of these things have been an evolution. And I don't think that anybody has the silver bullet, the actual formula. So when you hear things like you should just take vitamin C or you should just do certain things, these things might be a little bit helpful, but in the grand scheme of things, they're probably most helpful in a combination, in a well thought out medical regimen. The one thing that can be said, because it's been studied in a randomized way, scientifically with rigor, is that the vaccine is efficacious. That we can say. So what we can't say is that certain vitamins or certain treatments or everybody should need this is the ventilator is not right for everybody. Um, an antiviral medication isn't right for everybody, but the vaccine does appear to be right for everybody at the present time.
I Dr. Kandahar, I appreciate your time. We all appreciate your time and shedding some light on what it's like for you on a daily basis to come up against that. But hopefully people who are listening and listen to you talk about the vaccine and the time that led up to its development and the science behind it, and also validating Dr. Fauci and the information he's been steadily giving Americans throughout this crisis. I really appreciate you taking time and putting people's minds at ease about the vaccine and where we're headed from here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much again for being with us. I'm sure this isn't the first time we will hear from Dr. Kandahar. This is a topic that is not going to go away, correct, Tracy?
No, unfortunately not. But I'm so glad that we have a knowledgeable physician who we can call on whenever this topic comes up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday night edition of Zap Chat for the Ovis community. Thank you again. I'm Elsa Ramon. Tracy
And
Grant,
I'm Tracy
please.
Grant.
And we hope you join us here every Sunday night for our Zap Chats for the Ovis community.
Yes. Thank you.